All right, let's go ahead and call the work session to order. Sorry about starting a few minutes late. We were in executive session and had some matters we needed to finish up there, but we're here now. And we're going to go ahead and get started with our meeting. Many of you all recall that at our last work session, I guess we've had a work session, we received a report on efforts that the division is engaged in with trauma-informed care. And as part of that presentation, there was a discussion around how music can be used to impact those that are dealing with stressful situations and just being able to heighten one's productivity. And so we, after that meeting, sent an email out. We had a little discussion and thought that one of the things that we could do as a school board is take a moment and perhaps start our meetings off with a little bit of music that would help set the tone for us and the work and the business that we do in the public, as well as get an opportunity to highlight some of the great talent that we have here at Norfolk Public Schools. And so with that, we will start our meeting off today with some music and with student Jordan, is that correct? Maggie Jordan, my third daughter, is here to share with us. And Maggie, would you mind coming up and perhaps sharing a little bit about yourself? And we thank you for doing this for us today, and we'd just love to hear a little bit about you and have you share with us.
My name is Maggie Jordan. I am a sophomore at Granby High School under the direction of Mr. Larkin. It's a very good music program. I'm in their chamber orchestra and Vivace after school orchestra, and he also runs Strolling Strings, which you may have heard of. They go around and they have maybe like 60 gigs a year, so I'm involved in all of this.
So we thank you, Maggie, for. Oh, you have another? Oh, all right. Please
If that's
continue.
okay.
All right.
Oh, and that was the Bach concerto. And that was in E major, and now this is in E minor. So.
All right. thank you again. We appreciate you coming down and sharing with us. And Mr. Larkin, we're very thankful for your work. You know, you also taught her older sister, Bria, my other daughter. So, well, we thank you for that, and we really appreciate you for coming down and sharing with us.
Maggie, are you a Suzuki violinist?
I started as Suzuki. I did that for the first maybe 7 years, and then I switched teachers, and then I started doing more like romantic concertos and stuff like that. So
You're wonderfully trained. Is your mother here, your parent here?
my father's here.
Your father's here? Thank you.
Thank you.
So if nothing else reminds us why we are here doing the public's business, that was a great reminder. So we're going to move forward with the agenda. We have, as part of our agenda, continuing discussion around our annual plan review. One of the reasons that we, normally at the last meeting, we would have had a business meeting, but you recall we did an abbreviated session because the city council was having its public hearing on the budget at that time. So what we wanted to do tonight, in working with the Special Education Advisory Committee, we received a letter from them as part of their work involved with the plan and some recommendations. We do intend to have our additional discussion on the annual plan and take a vote today. Normally we would vote at a business meeting, but again, we did an abbreviation of that last week. So because we're going to take a vote at this meeting, we wanted to make sure that we had an additional opportunity for public comment on the annual plan document that we have before us before we continued our discussion and took a vote. So with that, what I'm going to do is open up the podium for members of the public who have signed up. Ms. Lynch, have we had anyone sign up?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And what we'll do is what we normally do at our business meeting, allow for members of the public who have signed up to come to the podium. They'll have 3 minutes, and the topic of discussion is the special education annual plan. So we will follow the normal procedures where the clerk will call the names. Individuals can come to the microphone, give your name and information, and any relevant thoughts that you have related to the special education annual plan that we have before us. With that, Ms. Lynch, you may call the first person.
I have first person Patricia McCormick, and followed by Catherine Ratanto.
Okay. Ms. McCormick, if you come to the microphone.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
I'm a proud parent of a child that currently has attended Crossroads Elementary for the last 10 years of her life. And she's getting ready to transition to high school, which has not been identified by the school at Crossroads. They're telling me that she will receive a letter in June, maybe, July timeframe. They're uncertain when she'll receive notification which school she will attend. So I'm here this evening to ask questions in reference to that. The late notice for any child with intellectual disabilities is very difficult on them, as it is for any general education child to transition from elementary, middle school to high school. Whenever changing school, it's very stressful, okay? But with a child that has intellectual disabilities, that child has other things that tend to happen. You know, they're not certain of the services that they're going to receive. They're not sure who's going to care for them. Without being able to go to the school and ask, you know, who's going to be my teacher? What are we going to be doing? What type of, you know, pre-discussion can we give them over the summer? there's nothing that I can pre-engage her with at this time, as well as the other 4 children that have been with her since kindergarten. So this is a deep concern for them all, and they've asked me to come on their behalf as well. It is, how do I say it? As a parent, we struggle day to day with their care, trying to make sure that they are successful in the world. We try and get them into programs that can make them successful, just like you and I go to work. Okay, there's work study programs at high school that I've heard about, but I'm unfamiliar with. Okay, because they're not telling us which school. So which one do we take her to for a pre-tour? Which one do I take her to say, okay, this is going to be your teacher, this is going to be your principal, this is the door that you're going to go in, this is the bell that you're going to listen for, okay? So that's basically what I would like to hear this evening. Can we speed this up? Can we get the answer, before school's out, so that we can possibly make tours, go shadow another student, let them see what it's like to be in the high school?
We won't respond at this time.
I know
but
you won't,
yes,
but
okay.
this is
Yes, ma'am.
this is what I would like for you guys to give us an answer to.
Yes, ma'am.
Help us, help them, so they're successful just like any other general education student could be. Thank you.
Thank you.
Kathy Rotana? Rantana, excuse me.
Hi. I have a child at CSEP because the regular public school did not have the resources to deal with a twice exceptional student. My concern is they have him he's a nonviolent student placed with violent students. So I get phone calls a couple times a week that he's been in an incident. It's not, I don't have any documentation on paper from the school because they don't do emails, or I don't get any paperwork from the school. I get a phone call. Yeah, it kind of doesn't sound right. When it comes to his safety or his education, I mean, he's placed with 5th and 6th grades. He's high school level, even though he's only in 7th grade. I guess my big concern is you're placing nonviolent and violent students together. My son requires a small classroom and a little bit more one-on-one or a little bit more attention than the average child. And their only placement was CSEP. So, and it's not been a good school year for somebody that, I don't have 3 minutes, but I just wanted to bring some of my concerns to the board that, I'd like to see that, he's in middle school, he'll be in 8th grade next year. To be able to have a small classroom for the kids that have high anxiety and can't be around groups of people and stuff like that. And we just need more resources instead of putting them with violent students where he's getting hurt all the time. He gets hit, and they got some violent ones in there, But that was my concerns I wanted to bring to the board.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
The next person I have on the list is Carter Mellon.
Malene?
Aline? I'm sorry.
Ms. Lynch, make sure your mic is on if it's not.
I've just got to tell you guys, I'm a professional cellist. I play with the Virginia Symphony. I'm a full-time cellist, so there are only 8 people in the Commonwealth of Virginia that have my job, and I think it's a hoot that you think music is relaxing, because auditioning for major orchestras and major music schools is definitely not relaxing. So With my 3 minutes, we had these school board elections, and I was trying to quantify some of the statistics with special ed when these elections came up, because I really think my impression is that people in the Norfolk Public Schools, and this includes the school board and the administration, are just disconnected from how bad the program has performed. So the state does results-driven accountability, and they publish these documents. And so I actually put these up on my truck in front of Taylor Elementary during the election. I want to make sure that everybody knew about it. This here is Norfolk. This is the lowest score in the Commonwealth of Virginia. I had to go and click on 132 different school divisions in Virginia on the VDOE website to find that. This is a 60% rating, which is also the lowest in Virginia. And this is an overall score for the special ed program. Down here is the scoring rubric, which says that Norfolk Public Schools needs an intervention for special ed. But for some reason, the VDOE listed as yellow needs assistance. So the VDOE is actually publishing this document improperly. I also want to draw your attention to the graduation rate, which I have over here. The graduation rate for Norfolk Public School students with a disability is 34.38%. So I took the number of kids you have in your program, and I calculated out how many would be assumed to graduate, and that's about 1,454. And then I calculated that 2,778 can be assumed to not graduate based on your statistics. Then I looked at the graduation rates of the other cities. For example, Chesapeake, 54%, Virginia Beach, 49%, Hampton, 49%, Newport News, 48%, Portsmouth, 43%, Suffolk, 35%, and there's Norfolk at 34.38%. So I calculated that probably if the kids were in Chesapeake, there'd be 861 more high school graduates if they had that special ed program, and even if they were in Portsmouth, there'd be 403 more graduates. Norfolk has never had documented in the VDOE, all the way back to 2005, has never had more than 37.09% graduation rate. And you had 5 of the 7 Hampton Roads cities top that last year alone. So I just wanted to make sure that when I come in and I speak about my daughter, it always sounds like it's me and my individual child and an individual problem. What I'm trying to convey to this board is that you have the worst special education program in Virginia documented on the VDOE website. The lowest score of 24. Out of the other ones, I went through all 132 of them, and the other low score was 26. So you actually won by, or lost by 2 points. So I just wanted you to be aware of that, because I feel like whatever you do with your annual budget, whatever you do, it has to be major. It has to be very serious. You have to look at, do you have enough money? Do you have the right people managing the money? Are you doing the right things? It could be a board-certified behavioral analyst. It could be more personnel. I don't know. I leave it up to you. I don't know enough of the details. I'm just telling you how bad it is. So I'll leave this with anybody that wants it.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Ms. Lynch, next.
Can Helen Brown step to the mic?
Good evening,
Good
Mr.
evening.
Jordan.
How are you?
Members of the school board, congratulations. Congratulations. Norfolk Commission for Persons with Disability questions why the city manager represents the city and families with children with disabilities, or when there are disputes. To our mind, there is no way that the city attorney can represent the city and the public school system, as well as parents who are having a dispute with the school board or with any problems, injury lawsuits, teacher injuries, and so forth. So we would like to have a financial allowance made. I know the school board itself had to get counsel that they used this past year. They had money, you appropriated money to have special counsel come in. This is what we need to set up for the parents. They're having enough problems with their children that they do not need to have to go through legal expenses and so forth. Our commission also understands, as Mr. Moline just said, that for the past 5 years, special performance reports for the Norfolk Public Schools show that our students have not met the standards at the state or the federal level. It's been harming to the children of the district, and especially those with special needs. We need to have more money put away into the budget. We need, as Mr. Moline said, we need board-certified behavioral analysis. We need special people to do the Wilson Reading Certified program for students with disabilities. Dr. Boone, you said that this was happening, and yet it seems people are coming in, but they are not board certified. They are not truly qualified to be given the title to tell us as people interested in children with disabilities that there's a behavior analyst. That's different than a board-certified behavioral analysis. And we just want to make sure that when you budget for special education, that you do have enough money to, number one, provide the parents with some compensation for having to get their own lawyers when they cannot deal with the city attorney, since he is averse to what's happening with the parents. And we also need to make sure that our children are getting all of the qualified, specialized people that they need in the classroom. If you get this K-1 program going, the preschool program, there will be justification at the end, because that's where you're going to see passing grades and people graduating. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The next person I have is Shantae Rickards. Look like you spell S-H-A-T-Y is the first name. The last name is R-I-H-D-E-S. I'm sorry. Yes, that may, okay, I apologize. Shirley.
Thank you very much. Good evening. Congratulations to the winners of the school board and city council, and Mr. Jordan and Ms. Bone. The Norfolk Commission for Persons with Disabilities asks why dollars that are slated for special ed be earmarked to contractor vendors before the students are slotted for placement. We question why Norfolk has exclusive contracts, ignoring qualified vendors for specific circumstances, such as working with kids with autism. Norfolk is the only city that has these exclusive contracts. Our commission recommends that the budget set aside money and disperse when they are needed. We feel that the state private day placement funds awarded to contracted city vendors may influence the decisions made in IEP meetings. Furthermore, we feel that money is wasted by the guaranteed slots in the selected private placements, and these exclusive contracts waste money that you don't have or you can use someplace else. The Norfolk Commission for Persons with Disabilities knows there's a problem in communication between the school board and the families with students who are disabled. We also know that negotiating the system requires more than a doctorate degree. Our commission recommends that there be a funding set aside for a position whose sole purpose is to create communication connections dialogue, interactions between parents with children who are in special ed, the school board, and SEAC. We know other districts have neutral parent resource centers with a person employed to assist parents in navigating the educational and special education process, who will attend meetings to assist parents and provide them with educational materials and referrals to other agencies. We suggest such a resource center and an assistant be independent by pressure of the school district. Our commission has met all of the school board, the new members, and we look forward to working with you. Thank you.
I have no more speakers signed up at this time.
Was there anyone who intended to sign up and did not have the opportunity to do so? Yes, ma'am, if you'd like to come forward.
My name is Alexis Detke. I'm a qualified mental health professional and a graduate from Old Dominion University. I do not have a child in the Norfolk Public School Systems, but I have worked extensively in the Norfolk Public School Systems through my job as an in-home counselor. I've also worked with a lot of the children at psychiatric facilities. So my question for the school board is, during my time as an in-home counselor, I have worked with many, many kids in CSEP, unfortunately, who are qualified as emotionally disturbed by Norfolk Public Schools. My biggest concern as a counselor walking into an area like that is that I see so many kids who are not working with certified behavioral health people. We have special ed teachers teaching them, but you do not have counselors. There's no TDT program in CSEP. If you guys don't know the term, it's a therapeutic day treatment. Oftentimes, I see kids at CSEP being put in restraints, which is very scary for any child. I don't like doing a restraint as a mental health professional, and kids don't like being touched either. Oftentimes when I witness this, particularly at CSEP, it's an easily avoidable situation. But because you're dealing with people who are trained in special ed but not necessarily behavioral health, you have kids being placed in unnecessary restraints. You have very angry parents who are scared about the well-being of their children. Because of my in-home background, I'm not actually a TDT counselor. I could be, I'm not. I intervene at the schools when there is not a TDT program. I show up at the schools because nobody else will, and fortunately I have a great company that I work for that allows me to do so. But I really want to ask the school board, in an area where you have so many people classified as emotionally disturbed, why are there no counselors? It's a valid question, and if the kids aren't classified as emotionally disturbed, you have parents who aren't present. You have kids who have self-esteem issues. You have kids I've seen with anxiety, kids who run out of the school 6 or 7 times a day. And by the way, at CSEP, they don't let you go back in once you've run out. So you have kids, 13, 14 years old, sitting outside your school, and I've witnessed it. And I'm not saying I necessarily disagree with it, because I understand they're outside, they could grab a weapon, come back in. But if you had counselors, if you had people who were trained, and not just special education teachers or people with a little bit of experience, but not that much. If you had a counselor who was willing to pull a kid aside for 30 minutes, have somebody who's trained in de-escalation techniques and has a couple years in the field, and not people, no offense, who I've seen who are a little, what do we call it in the facility, restraint happy. They like the adrenaline. They like the rush. They come in like the SWAT team and scare me. But I really advocate for it as a mental health professional. These kids, especially at CSEP, they're doing their best, but they need more help. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so those are public comments that we have at this time. With that, we will close the public comment period, and we will proceed on with continuing discussion of the annual plan, and with that, I will turn things over to Dr. Boone.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. I'll ask Dr. James Mitchell if she'll come to the podium. Last time when we talked, there were about 3 or 4 areas that the board had asked for additional information and clarification. So we've posted those on board docs for the board, and I'll just ask Dr. James Mitchell to walk you through what those those areas were, one dealt with the data points associated with the number of student suspensions that led to the requirement for the intervention, the CEIS plan. There was also a question, and that 15% set aside based on suspension. There was a question also about whether or not we were required to do the set aside, the second box on that page, and what that set aside looks like for students who attend private schools. And so I'll turn it over to Dr. James Mitchell and let her walk you through the information we provided.
Okay, so the document, page 10, the second box has been completed, and the answer to that was yes, we do have to set aside funding for private school students who receives speech language therapy services. And so what we do is we have a contractor who provides that services, the speech language therapist, and we have $1,000 in that supply line. But if there is savings from that contract services position and a need for more supplies, we can always do a budget transfer.
Support that. So let me give a little more detail and may answer your question, Ms. Basine. The IDEA regulations require that if a student is placed in a private school by their parents and they're identified as having a disability, then the school system must engage in child find and provide some of those services. So that's where the speech piece comes up. So most of the students who have families who have requested the services are students with speech language impairments, and that's the support that's required for that particular piece.
So, so my question was actually, so one part of the question that we had at the last, or that I raised at the last meeting, is what actually triggers that piece that it would say yes? So what
were the data?
What does
that
the
drove
data
that
have to say to get us to the point where it goes from a no to a yes?
On the speech one, I think it had to do with the number of students in privately
placed schools.
Privately
But
placed schools.
they have been found eligible because we still have to continue to keep track of them and look at their eligibility and their services every 3 years.
Right.
So once identified, Norfolk Public Schools, especially since the child is a resident of Norfolk, we must continue to look at their eligibility. They don't receive an IEP, but they receive an ISP, Individualized Services Plan. And so their services are documented on the services plan.
Okay.
And it's just them being found eligible as a student who has a speech language impairment.
Okay, so it's just for children with that disability category?
That's the category for us.
That's the category that we will provide the services in. You can, what traditionally we've always did speech language therapy, and other school divisions do that as well, because we can provide more services to the children.
Sometimes
However,
when you get to the greater level of disability, it's virtually impossible to provide it at the private school site. So parents have to make some decisions as to whether or not the child is enrolled in the public schools, just simply because all the resources that aren't available.
Okay, so the definition in this case of private school or private day placement is different from what we've been hearing a lot about.
Exactly.
Right,
Yes,
okay, so
that's different.
that's also the clarification that I want to make here. Okay.
Yes, right. These are for parents who've chosen to have their children educated in private schools.
In private schools, okay.
So
And then, and then on this page, there was a question also about what triggers the 15%, and I think we answered that was based on
That was
our discipline
the
data.
discipline data.
days or more out of school suspension, yes.
Which again, you will recall, we had discussed our discipline data as part of the accountability plan back in the fall, and for the last year and a half or so, and that leads to what we've put in place as a result of looking at those data, as well as the alternative ed review, that's when we started creating this umbrella of what are the services and interventions and proactive steps we need to take to be able to support students' positive behaviors and ultimately reduce the number of out-of-schools and in-school suspensions. So you heard, the trauma-informed care was one piece of that. What are we doing? In the budget that the board approved and sent to City Council, we are talking about some behavioral support in our schools. Again, not for students with disabilities per se, but what are the actions that we take in advance to prevent a student from perhaps becoming identified as a student with disability because of chronic behavioral issues that impact the education. And then, as Dr. James Mitchell shared at the last meeting, this 15% set aside, it will also support that work going forward, because the requirement is not for working with students with disabilities, but for working for the general ed population of how do we intervene early. The data that you received reflected our highest needs were at grades 6 and 9, 6, 7, 9, and then 8th grade was the 4th highest. And so that's why we've targeted in the plan that's being submitted to VDOE the intervention at grades 6 and 9. And then when we pair that with the other things that the district is doing, we begin to have a very comprehensive model of how we address behaviors.
Well, are you going to go to something difficult? I think Ms. Wagner had.
I'm going back to your trauma-informed care, because I remember that was for the younger population. Did we ever address, or did we identify what we did for, let's say, the 6 through 9 or the 9?
So the trauma-informed care that we shared was a pilot that we had at elementary,
Exactly.
but we also have some work going on in the middle and the high school. So we haven't excluded those. The funding for the pilot with the Up Center and the money through United Way has been pretty much targeted for those elementary schools that were part of the United for Children footprint originally. So that's PB Young,
Right.
Tidewater Park, I'm looking at Dr. Bernstein, Chesterfield, Jay Cox, Ruffner was the middle school in that one. And so that's what we're doing. What we're building now, as a result also of this 15% set aside that's required, is the intervention that will begin with grades 6 and 9 to be able to address that. And so you remember the presentation last time, Dr. James Mitchell walked us through. There would be a coordinator, there are those teacher assistants who would receive additional training that would then be in those schools, in those classrooms to support this work. So that's what's happening at the secondary level as we continue some of the other work. Our goal is to expand the trauma-informed care as we look at the results from that and find the resources and garner the capacity to be able to do that. We've also begun our exploration, along with the Norfolk Police Department, of restorative justice, which is a very appropriate intervention model at the secondary level. You all have heard me say any number of times, PBIS is a highly effective behavioral intervention program, but it's most effective elementary to early middle. And once we get in upper middle and into high school, we need a different intervention piece.
Right.
And so that's why we started the examination of restorative justice for a high school piece.
And I know with the trauma-informed care, they had not put the instrument together, so when will we begin to see the results of or the data that's put together?
Well, as you recall from that presentation, that part of the grant requirements that they have for the funding that they received to do this, they've begun working with an evaluator to design the rubrics and the data collection system. So as soon as they have that, we intend to come back in a year. The pilot is initially a 2-year pilot. And so you heard from the presentation that Ms. Long did that day, that there's a lot of progress. What the anecdotal and collective information has been from both the teachers as well as parents and some of the students about what they see as the differences. So they will begin to formally collect some more of those data, and we'll be coming back to the board once they've completed that process.
But just the trauma-informed care is broader.
Separate from the
broader
special
than-
education,
right.
yeah.
Ms. Basine, did you have something additional?
Well, it's related to the plan, but if we're walking
But we walked through the plan. I think the goal here was to
Address.
respond to the questions, and
Right.
then we're having a discussion about
Right.
the plan as a whole.
Right, we wanted to bring back the data points.
Right, I meant the questions that were raised at the last one. So one of the things that we did talk about last time was also around the behavioral specialists and the training, including, you know, the applied behavioral specialists. And if you can reiterate what the response, just so that I understand that we do have trained behavioral specialists in our programs, or the teachers have received the training? Because
So
those are two different things.
Yeah, and there's a third thing being brought in this. What we're talking about here is not the support that's provided for students with autism. A lot of times when we talk about ABAs, we're talking about the direct service provision to students with autism as that model. What we're talking about here are training individuals, including those that are not part of the special ed annual plan, but I presented to the board as part of my budget recommendation to support. Those are not about applied behavioral analysts, but it really is about people who have experience in behavioral interventions. How do you work with students? How do we find out what's the root cause of the behavior? The behavior is usually a symptom of something else. So what do we find out about that? So those positions that we've earmarked in the budget, should we receive funding from the city, will allow us to do that at the elementary school. What we're trying to do with the special education annual plan is there's a coordinator piece of this. And that coordinator then would work with the various teacher assistants who will go through extensive training this summer. And then throughout the year to do that, you will recall, why am I telling your story? We were talking about the Rethink program and all of that. I go back to my sped roots. What can I tell you? Dr. James Mitchell.
But you pretty much explained everything,
sorry.
Dr. Boone. I have one other question.
Well,
But,
hold
you
on.
know, we talked about the Rethink, and in the description there, the role of MAT as part of it, the whole cultural
The
piece.
relationship building piece, the
Right.
de-escalation
De-escalation.
piece, that'll be part of the training. Rethink has, and we use Rethink, when you think of Rethink, you look at students with autism first. But we've now used Rethink, especially the data piece and the modules in that system, for teachers who work with students with an emotional disability, or students who are identified as intellectually disabled. So that data piece goes across the board for those self-contained or division-wide teachers. So Rethink is just not for autism.
Right.
And one of the training modules that's in Rethink are specifically for paraprofessionals, as it relates to behavior intervention strategies and such.
So, Dr. Gabriel and I were talking and said that, might be a little confused. Let me just try to do a couple of things here. So we have the annual plan before us. We had a work session around the annual plan. We've heard some additional comment. We had some questions, and so the intent here is for us to address concerns or recommendations or modifications for this plan that we intend to enact and vote upon shortly. This is not to have a broad general conversation around special education, which we're going to continue to do and always will do. So I just want to make sure that we are focused in one sense on any board recommendations or suggestions around the plan that we have before us, and then just kind of note the things that we know we're going to have ongoing discussions on centered around the special education program.
And if I can, like you said, our goal was to make sure we had provided answers to the questions that you had from last time to help inform your decisions.
So I just wanted to say that before we go down a lot of different paths and not address what we have before us. So with that said, did you have a question, Dr. Gabriel?
So in our last discussion, we talked about the fact that we needed to set aside a certain portion of money to train professionals in order to work with non-disabled students as a part of this plan.
Yes.
And as a part of that plan, we were gonna go from X number of professionals, and we were gonna bring it down through attrition, and train those professionals in, working with the students who are non-disabled in the specific grades that you had mentioned, correct?
Grade 6 and 9.
Grade 6 and 9, okay. That is a part of passing this plan, so okay. And the data that you attached on the board docs speaks to that.
Yes.
Okay, so I think going forward, I'm fine with that, but I still need to understand who those individuals fall under, and how are we going to be monitoring the data so that we can find out, are we making progress towards the original reason as to why we were cited for having to keep the $1 million, or I can't remember the exact amount, set aside.
And just as part of that, if you remember, so we did request the impact on positions and organizational chart and so forth. And so as part of the our business meeting coming up, we said we would receive that information, that review moving forward. So that piece of it.
But let me do the quick overview. And we had to carve out $1 million from how we were currently using the funds. So in the model development that Dr. James Mitchell presented to us administratively initially, the goal was, where could we find the resources within what we had? And hopefully be able to continue to use staff that we have in a way. And so the model that she presented was the utilization of teacher assistants in order to carve out the $1 million, as well as that coordinator, that support specialist, and the 24 paraprofessionals. That then left a delta between 37, I think it was a difference of about 12 or 13 teacher assistants. And so the last time the question was asked, what would happen, how would we get to those numbers? And I shared with the board that we're looking to deal first with attrition, that we would not be hiring any new teacher assistants until we were clear as to whether or not we had taken care of all of the ones, the 24, and that they could be placed. So that's what we're doing. Mr. Billups shared with us just yesterday when we were talking where they are again, and not hiring new TAs until we know what all of our attrition will be. We already have some retirements and some resignations and things from some. And we believe that we are going to be okay with that piece where no one loses a job. But that's why we aren't doing any additional hiring until we're straight with those numbers for backfilling anything, to make sure we can then adjust and support those folks who are employed. You will recall the one nuance in this and the one challenge is that you would think the state would allow us to submit this plan for the 15% set aside as a separate entity so we could get approval for the plan, but it's part of the actual annual plan submission. But what I've asked Dr. James Mitchell to do is work with the state to see if they can at least give us feedback on this piece sooner than what the full plan approval process will be, so we will know how to proceed to take care, make sure we're taking care of the staffing that we have. And if not approved, will we have to go back to the drawing board? But that's why it was important for us to show what we were doing umbrella, that this isn't the only thing that we were doing, and then all of those other pieces that we've talked about.
I just received an email just before we sat down from VDOE in reference to the application that they cite on the annual plan on page 10 as a prelim, so we can go ahead and get that completed and sent to them, which I was going to contact them myself to see if we could move, further and, give you a glimpse of this is what we want to do. Is it okay? So now that we have that, we can complete the paperwork, get it back to them, and get our feedback.
Yeah, so.
Any additional questions? 'Cause what we can do is, we're still in the work session portion, but we can also get a motion on the floor, and then if there's any final discussion around any recommended modifications that anybody would like to put forward.
Yeah, my thing is always the overage for grade, but when BDOE came down and they looked at the middle schools, one of the things that they looked at was, and I'm asking the questions, was the overage for grade in the middle schools?
No, that's not specifically what they looked at. They
Was
determined,
that one of the things?
that's one of the findings that they saw. We just had the verbal briefing, and it will be this summer before we get a final report. But one of the things that they noticed, again, that and it's under the idea of students being educated with age-appropriate peers.
Well, and I guess my question is, with this particular grant, will that target or address some of those findings?
Certainly, it provides some, doesn't specifically address that finding, and they made that as an observation. Until we have the final report, we don't know that that's a finding. That was an observation that they shared with us. So one of the things that the plan itself supports the overall implementation of IDA. So we have teaching positions, we have teacher assistant positions, and all of that. Some of what the experience with the overage piece deals with district policies that impacts not only students with disabilities, but our non-disabled students.
Right.
For example, we have started that discussion, and it came out following the recycling piece. The fact that we have a requirement that students had to have a certain number of verified credits before they could move on to the next grade level. That's why we had such a bottleneck at 9th grade, because there were students who had passed the coursework but hadn't yet passed the Norfolk Public Schools prescribed number of verified credits. Therefore, they weren't going on to 10th grade. So our 9th grade numbers always look very heavy. Then they get the credits, and then 11th grade looks high, and then you wonder, well, why is 10th grade so low? Because the students have continued to acquire the credits. The work that we're doing administratively is around, and at some point we will be coming back to the board to inform you as to what are those changes. We are looking at that work now in relation to the profile of a Virginia graduate and where some of those graduation requirements are changing, especially based on the number of verified credits that students have to have, the other options for verified credits. So it's a perfect time for us to get in and look at that. So that's the overage for grade piece. It doesn't have anything to do with this plan.
Okay, so this doesn't address that at all?
Not specifically.
So may I ask if there's any specific recommendations for this plan as we have before it, that we get those or get a motion to put this on the floor, and then we can address that? Dr. Robinson?
I would like to make a motion that we adopt the plan as presented.
Dr. Robinson's put forward a motion to approve the plan we have before us. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Doyle. So any additional discussion specific to the plan that we have before us from any member of the board? Going once. All right, hearing none, then Ms. Lynch, will you call the roll, please?
Ms. Basane?
Aye.
Ms. Dahl?
Aye.
Dr. Gabriel?
Aye.
Reverend Hayward?
Aye.
Dr. Robertson?
Aye.
Ms. Wagner?
Aye.
Mr. Jordan?
Aye. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next item we have is,
After we finish that, I found my other notes, but I'm good now.
okay,
We made the sale.
foreign language. Matter of fact, before I do that, Dr. Robinson, do you have a hard stop at 6:30? I just want to check because I was.
I'm okay.
Because I want to move some votes up if.
No, go ahead. I'm okay.
You sure? Okay. All right. Next, we have a foreign language
Adoption.
and ESL textbook adoption presentation.
Dr.
Boone?
Rogers is coming forward, and I know they are members of the team to support. Dr. Cataldo and others.
Good evening, Chairman Jordan, school board members, Dr. Boone. This evening, we will be providing you with a recommendation for adoption of foreign language and English as a second language instructional materials in the form of textbooks. As you may recall from previous presentations such as this, we generally are on a review and approval schedule for textbook adoption on a basis of about 7 years as recommended from the Virginia Department of Education. Our last adoption for foreign language textbooks has been quite bit more time than 7 years. It's been since 2007, and we've not had an opportunity to approve instructional materials specifically for English language learners, so this would be the first time. So we've added some additional information to share with you today with regards to how that goes with the Virginia Department of Education, and we've asked our senior coordinator of English language learners and foreign language, Meredith Hobson, to come up and provide you with an overview of the process and the procedure that we took to come to this recommendation. So I'll ask Ms. Hobson to join us.
Good evening. Thank you. How you doing? And I can assure you all my teachers and our foreign language students are grateful and excited, but this process has begun. I will start, and okay, be patient with me here for 1 second. This is right.
Oh, you got to put it on PowerPoint. It's not on.
I'm sorry, y'all.
Is there a different option on there that you click to make it?
Can you put it on the app? Cynthia's going to do it. There you go. I think Cynthia.
Is it that one? You're welcome to come help. I'm not sure.
At the computer. Do it at the computer.
It's on.
Thanks, y'all.
It's on now.
There we go.
Oh, there we
Nuh-uh,
go.
It's not on now.
I must have. I think I turned it off.
Do it on slideshow.
You got a slide.
I think we're good.
Okay.
There we go. So this is just an outline of the typical process, and you may be aware that the Virginia Department of Education typically for most disciplines has their own vetting and review process. And so the state generally comes up with a list of approved textbooks, and then local divisions have their own internal process where they then choose which resource from that list is most appropriate for their needs and their community interests. It does allow for local school boards may adopt textbooks that are not on the board-approved list, provided the school board selects such books in accordance with the regulations promulgated by the board. I'll explain why this is significant to us in just a moment. This is Norfolk Public Schools textbook adoption policy, and it does mention again that the board shall adopt books subject to regulations of the state, but it also indicates that we can adopt books not on the state-approved list as long as we follow the established guidelines in accordance with special guidelines. And here we are. It is the guidelines for local textbook approval. And this is significant because in 2015, the Virginia Department of Education decided not to, or they made a decision to discontinue that state-level review process. So there is no state-approved list of foreign language textbooks. So that means the onus falls on us as the local divisions to make those selections. So to that end, that's a lot of responsibility for us, but our guiding objectives were to certainly maintain accordance with the 2014 Standards of Learning for Foreign Language. They were recently revised by VDOE in 2014. Cool. And that's significant. There's a significant change there and shift in philosophy with those 2014 standards. There was a movement towards proficiency, as developed by the American Council on the Teaching of Foreign Languages. And that idea of proficiency really is just a shift from moving from, instead of focusing on what language kids know, it's what they can actually do with the language. So less on what they know and what they can do and perform. And I'm sure some of you have, there's that situation where you took 4 years of French in high school, but you can't use any of it. And so we're trying to get to where and you can see that the goal is meaningful interaction with others. The focus really is on communication. And that's specifically with foreign language. With respect to the resources for our English learners, that means a real focus on meaningful interaction and certainly communication, but also a focus on academic language. And so the English is taught, but it is taught through content. Content is the vehicle. And so when we look at the third grade level for English learners, it is very consistent and aligned with the third grade SOLs. And so they are getting that content as they learn the English. Certainly an authentic use of language in real world settings. And that's huge. I mean, it's not, if you may remember the verb charts, if any of you took foreign language and you have to conjugate and spell everything correctly.
Vini, vini, vici.
Right, there you go.
Latin in high school.
Yes, ma'am. But we want to make sure that they're given opportunities to use this in an authentic situation. What do you do if you have a problem in your hotel room and you need a new room? Can you negotiate those types of terms and situations? Certainly an incorporation of technology. especially in a content where it is so globally oriented. And then have online access to teacher and student textbooks and resources. Those are what we decided, as a content area and via teachers are going to be our priorities. So our timeline began mostly in the spring, although my teachers did begin looking at options for resources. I reached out to local coordinators, as far as Fairfax, Virginia Beach, so local and afar as to what, especially because there is no VDOE approved list, I wanted to make sure that what we began to consider was relevant from the get. And so we reached out to them, and then in January, we asked principals to choose their building representative for language. Although it was very important to me, and I think the division, that all foreign language teachers had input in the process. So while they were committee members, all foreign language teachers had an opportunity to vet the books. We did have a publisher's presentation night in February, so we invited the publishers to come and kind of have an initial presentation to teachers. All of our department chairs and teachers were invited to attend. That was at Norview High School. And then we had the resources sent to all the schools so the teachers could then review them. We had evaluation forms sent out. And then, at about March, the committee members, they returned the forms to us at the end of April, actually. And during this time, the books were also on display for public review in the public library. And now we are at the point where we have made it, the votes have been tallied and we have made our recommendations and decisions. Again, all foreign language teachers were able to evaluate the textbooks under consideration. And we looked at more than just, well, first we used our typical, our common, I believe, Norfolk Public Schools evaluation instrument. It was the same one consistent with social studies and all the content areas. And so we first look at alignment to the Virginia Standards of Learning. And then more face validity, the content, how it's organized, the technology features. And we actually even went a step further in our rankings, and we looked at those ACTFL guidelines. Again, that's the American Council on Teaching Foreign Languages, to look at, does it focus on what we call the 5 C's in our content, in our discipline? Communication, cultures, connections, comparisons, communities, and looking, does it enhance critical thinking skills? Is it more, is it heavy on grammar, or does it give the kids an opportunity to learn and communicate? So in terms of community, from February through really the end of March, we had all of our books for consideration on display at Baron F. Black branch of the Norfolk Public Library. We did select that because it's sort of centrally located throughout the city. There was easy parking, and it was near our office, so if there were any questions, somebody could pop on by. It was also on display in our office at the Rosemont Center. The public was notified of the process and the access to the evaluation forms via the webpage, the pilot, and they could submit those evaluation forms either in a hard copy the librarian sent us or electronically. And we did hear from the librarians. There was a lot of positive feedback from most, for actually all the books. I think people do enjoy looking at the pictures of other countries, and it's exciting to see a foreign language. We didn't get a lot of technical feedback, and I think that's because, the average Joe may not know Chinese, and we had Chinese books on display, but we did get a lot of buzz. And I believe this is consistent with VDOE and our own process. So there was a publisher quality assurance. There's a contract they have to sign that just proves that it's, the resources are free from any errors and typos, et cetera. And the professional development of these resources, this is a really big piece, and it's why, of course, we want all of our teachers to have input in the book selection process as well, because they're the ones in the trenches using the books. And so the training on how to use them and to get the most out of these resources is really important. The titles that we chose, mostly Houghton Mifflin, they have a good record with us in terms of offering professional development, either free or an affordable price, and it tends to be ongoing as well. I know that one of my goals for our teachers in using this is not just how to use all the features, that's certainly important, but also developing common assessments that are in accordance with that, and developing our own pacing guide so we know how we're going to use these books throughout the year, and so that they connect between level 1, level 2 as they move up the spiral. So these are the subject areas: Spanish, French, Latin, and our Mandarin Chinese are our foreign languages. Then we have English as a second language, and that's grades K through 12. I guess I should have clarified that all of our second language offerings are mostly middle school through high school. Then, of course, our advanced placement courses, and that includes our IB courses as well. They use the same resources. They overlap: AP Spanish, AP French, and AP Latin, and then, of course, the IB French, Spanish, and Latin. And here are the titles, and the publishers, of course. Avancemos was Houghton Mifflin, Bien dit, from Houghton Mifflin as well. We selected the Cambridge Latin course, Easy Steps to Chinese. And then our advanced courses tend to be, they were different publishers. It was interesting. The common publishers like Houghton Mifflin were more limited when you get to the advanced level and rigor. And so Pearson and Vista Higher Learning tend to be the very common options in all areas of the state for our AP courses. In fact, the College Board recommends these specific resources, Pearson and Vista Higher Learning. And then for our English learners, all grades, we're recommending, hoping to use the National Geographic Reach series. It's Cengage Learning. And again, it's very sequenced and spiraled from K through 12. We've used some of National Geographic resources in the past, and they've been highly effective. They come highly touted by folks around the state, and actually even TESOL, the national organization of ESL teachers. Answer any questions for you.
Dr. Boone. The one thing I was going to say, there's not a vote tonight. The vote is scheduled for our May 16th business meeting.
So 2 questions. Do we have the money to adopt and purchase all of the books that we have displayed up there for next year?
Yes, we do.
Good, great.
Exclamation, exclamation.
Good, that's great.
And Ms. Rhonda back there is smiling because we've had that discussion just today again to make sure we're straight. And so that we're purchasing not classroom sets, but student books. Because that is what has happened over time when you said the adoption was in place for so long. And finding those materials to replace began to be impossible. So that's how we ended up with so many classroom sets. Our goal is to purchase the textbooks for the number of students enrolled in those courses.
So we will be able to do that.
We are going to do that.
Good. Thank you. I did have a parent call about that this year.
I remember in the past,
Right.
so that's why we have been talking about it.
Thank you. And then tell me about the technology enhancements that these books offer.
The online platform for Houghton Mifflin, and actually that ended up being one of the selling features. When I looked at the comments, the teachers ranked the books, but then they also wrote their comments about the strengths and weaknesses. And the online platform for the Houghton Mifflin was the most appreciated by the teachers. And like, for example, one of the salient features is every day there's a newspaper article, a current event that's put out from something that's happening in the Spanish-speaking world someplace, and it's even and you can read that same article leveled. So it's the same article with the same content of this current event, but you can select level 1, level 2, level 3, so it's at an appropriate reading level, and that's daily. The other piece of that online part was students will have mobile access, so they can access. The subscription is for home and for at school. And the best part to me is, as a former foreign language teacher, is the feedback that you're able to provide, so that the kids can submit their answers via the platform, and the teacher can submit immediate feedback via the, online. Instead of, typically you do the worksheet at home and the workbook, and you have to wait to get to school the next day to find out if your answers are correct. And even then, sometimes, you hope the kids pay attention and make corrections, but with a lot of these, it either automatically grades their answers because you're submitting the answers online, or there's a place for teacher feedback. And then it's actually also very easy for the teachers to submit some of those assessments into the gradebook.
Thank you.
Dr. Robinson?
Just a process question. Approximately how many reviews did you receive from the public?
From the public? We actually received one. But again, and that's why I followed up with the librarian at the branch, because she did say that just about everybody came in, looked at them, and flipped through them. We didn't get a whole lot of feedback, but I do believe that it's because I think people feel like it's out of their element. If it's a math textbook or a science textbook, something that they're familiar with, that they can actually get in and evaluate. That's my subjective opinion, but I would have to believe that has something to do with it.
And just another question, this is really not directly to the textbook adoption, but has there ever been any movement to start foreign language in the elementary schools?
We do offer, actually, now, there's a segment on MPS, we filmed a segment on MPS Now today about our Chinese program. Those Chinese courses and the books, really, the teachers are completely funded by the Confucius Institute. via Old Dominion University. And so right now we have six Chinese teachers in our division teaching Chinese. And they're at Larchmont Elementary School. We have a Chinese teacher there all day, every day. And so it is starting there. And it has impacted enrollment in the middle schools. I mean, we see it growing. I mean, I believe we started with 2 teachers, then it went to 4. We had another one this past year. And actually, they're going to China this week or next week, and to request more. So it is having an impact. I agree with you, starting at the lower ages, but certainly funding is an issue. But no, we haven't, not in my time here. This is my second year in my time that hasn't started.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Wagner.
Which actually, Ms. Doyle asked the question. I was asking about the technology piece.
And Dr. Robinson, as you spoke of the elementary, some of us remember the work that was going on at Dreamkeepers Academy at the time. So I can just say for me, you will hear that referenced many times, because I think we had some great work going on there down at the elementary school level, dealing with foreign language and a lot of other things that.
It's critical thinking.
Hopefully as we advance this budget and continue the work that we've been doing, we will see that occur, and it also ties into our equity piece as well, so.
I have one other, I'm sorry, go ahead. I'll stay. I just want to know, what's the difference between spiral and scaffold?
When you talk about this, a spiral curriculum, it's when maybe the same concept is revisited at each level, but at a more rigorous level.
Right.
I mean, like, we might touch on just like a house vocabulary, like the basic 5 things in your house in Spanish 1. And then by the time they'll revisit maybe the vocabulary of the house, but when you get to level 4, it's more, how do you rent a house? And how do you calculate the price or negotiate a rent or get repairs done? So it's visiting those same concepts year after year, but with more rigor.
Reverend Haywood and Ms. Bassine.
I had an opportunity to spend some time with the teacher at Larchmont, who is from the Confucius Institute. And it was just a great time, her explaining the program and so forth. But one of the questions I had was, has Norfolk Public Schools looked at expanding that program out from Larchmont to some of the other schools?
Well, actually, this year, with the addition of the one new Chinese teacher we have, we assigned that teacher to the STEM Academy at Compostela, because, I mean, in my brief time here, though, I could see that we do have those teachers in the same area, and we wanted to expand those opportunities, and particularly with Compostela having K through 8, I feel like that was a natural fit, that they could serve those credit-bearing courses in the middle school, but then also be able to reach down to the elementary and support those. But I would like to continue. I mean, I'll take any suggestions.
Anything else? Oh, Ms. Bassine, I'm sorry.
So since you brought up the Confucius Institute, are there credentialing differences because I know at least I get a lot of questions about that, living in a place where there could be a larger talent bank of individuals that could help fill, gaps in our foreign languages. Are there, so my question is, are there credentialing differences, and are those conversations happening in terms of looking at alternative credentials for filling the gaps?
I know that the Confucius Institute is recognized nationwide. I mean, I couldn't answer all those exactly, but I know that it's a vetted process between the Ministry of Education in the People's Republic of China, our own Department of Education. So, and certainly they do have, our equivalent of a bachelor's degree. Now, is it the same specifics with respect to the teaching certification? Not so much. And honestly, we as a division have to do a lot of support, just if nothing else, just the cultural differences of an American classroom and a Chinese classroom. In fact, on the interview that we had today, our Chinese teacher was asked that question, what's the difference between the two classrooms? And she said that, and it was actually a really beautiful thing that she said about our country, but that is that in the American classroom, more creativity is fostered, and more communication, whereas, in China, it's more about the exam and testing and grading. And so sometimes we have to give a lot of support with respect to classroom management and behavior interventions and that kind of thing. But so I think they may be lacking that. But in terms of the actual credentials, they are highly qualified. I mean, it's a very coveted opportunity to be able to come here to America and teach for 2 years. So they are vetted heavily.
They also have to have very strong English skills.
Yes, they do, yeah, right, that's part of the process, because if they, if they can't communicate when they're here, then that's an issue.
Well, I was just curious, and I wasn't asking to question the credentialing. It's, are there other opportunities?
Oh, you mean
like
beyond
that,
Chinese?
beyond Chinese that we could be taking advantage of?
I know the Chinese has been very vigorous. I also previously did the Hanban Institute, had worked with them, Confucius, Hanbang. So there were a couple out of China. They've been more aggressive, I think, in terms of the availability of that type of language exchange program.
But I hear you, because there is, it's a challenge everywhere. People just aren't going to college to major in French anymore to be French teachers, and so we're struggling to fill those. So that's a good question. There's none that I'm aware of, but.
Well, yeah, I just ask because even at conferences, I hear people say, well, there are these, individuals who are fluent in French, for instance, or German, but yet they have to go through the rigorous process of getting credentialed where they could be offering,
Right, and so if they were in a
understand
sponsorship program similar to the Confucius Institute, they come in vetted and at a level that meets their requirements, yeah.
All right.
Only ones I've ever heard of are similar to like the Fulbright situation, but the challenge with that is it's very temporary. It rotates like every year or every few months even sometimes, and so it's hard to, establish consistency when the turnover is that high.
Thank you very much for the
Thank you.
presentation.
Appreciate it.
And just a reminder, we'll have the adoption vote coming up in the coming weeks. With that, we had a executive session, and I want to get a motion for action related to the student appeal matter that we had. So do we have a motion to that effect?
Get that written down.
I don't see Attorney Cloud, so pretty much the motion would be to uphold the recommendation of the administration related to the student appeal matter. So if someone would like to put that on the floor.
I'll make a motion that we uphold the administration's position on the student matter, student A, in the matter presented before us.
Have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All right, so moved by Dr. Robinson, second by Mrs. Doyle. Ms. Lynch, if you call the vote, please. Call the roll.
Ms. Basine?
Aye.
Ms. Dahl?
Aye.
Dr. Gabriel?
Aye.
Reverend Hayward?
Aye.
Dr. Robertson?
Aye.
Ms. Wagner?
Aye.
And Mr. Jordan?
Aye. I don't think we had any other public action that was required. Oh, I'm saying from the closed session. Okay, last we have matters of the board. One item we have listed there, we discussed at our last work session a resolution related to later start times that Ms. Basine had put forward. We had some discussions and recommendations, been some edits. We have the edits. Again, there's no plan to vote on this tonight, but I wanted to make sure the board has seen the edits, and if there's anything further that anyone would like to bring forward or discuss related to the resolution, either from you, Ms. Basine, or any member of the board. All right, so anything else that any other board members have? One thing before we leave, just an announcement piece, but any matters of the board that anyone like to bring forward at this time? All right, so we started the meeting and Miss Maggie Jordan was here, and I was fumbling trying to find her information. Of course, Ms. Lynch and Mr. Butts had the paper right here in front of me. I'm just used to being paperless. But, she introduced herself, and I just wanted to share with the board a couple of other things about her. She mentioned she was in the IB program. She's all Virginia Orchestra, 14th chair violin. She's in the top 10 as far as her class rank is concerned. She also is involved in track. She mentioned Strolling Strings, and is involved with the Bay Youth Orchestra. So I just wanted to make sure that I properly recognized her in that regard. And related to that, I had in the mail today a letter from that I was copied on from Norfolk Southern Corporation from David Good, the retired chairman, president, and CEO. And he had written a letter to Danielle Roby, and just want to share part of that. If you all, did everybody get a copy of that? Okay, it says, Dear Ms. Roby, I'm writing to recognize the exceptional performance of the students at last week's Arts Festival performance of Bernstein at 100 by the Virginia Symphony. As you know, Maestro Folletta dedicated the final number, and you don't know, I don't know that foreign language, Cantaday Finale, sounds good to me, to my wife Susan and me. We were moved by that, and it was particularly meaningful and enjoyable to have the students from the Norfolk High Schools participating. The students were great. I told as many as I could to catch after the performance how much we enjoyed it and how meaningful it was to my family. I hope you will pass on to the principals and music teachers from the high schools, as well as the students who participated, our deep appreciation for what they did. I know this must have been a good experience for kids as well, and I applaud you, the Arts Festival and the Virginia Symphony, for coming together on events such as this. It shows what the arts and education can do together. Please let me know if I can ever be of assistance to you. So I just wanted to share that,
Think of a couple.
that good news.
And if I can, just to piggyback on that, we had the Virginia International Tattoo last week. And of course, it wasn't our year for the musical support, but the Granby NJROTC represented the flags of the country, and they also, the big rollout of the American flag that's part of the opening, and waving the huge flag. So those were our NJROTC members from Granby.
All right, so again, congratulations to Ms. Doyle, Ms. Basine. I see in the audience Ms. Christine Smith. And with that, we will adjourn for the evening.